yours called tax collecting.
Okay, tax collecting is part of it, but does it say anything about interest?
No.
Okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to find, so this is a bonus assignment. It's worth 5 bonus points, 5 problems worth. If you just come up with one, you find it from the Bible, one verse that deals with interest, debt, lending, loaning, borrowing, anything that relates to what we're talking about here. If you just bring that verse on your homework paper, you have the reference, usually in Proverbs, and then the verse written out. I'll give you 5 bonus points just for that. That's due tomorrow. Anything to do with lending, borrowing, debt, interest, anything to do with that. No, it's just one verse. Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be in one. It can just say something about a lender or something about debt. So does it say anything about it? I want you guys to tell me by your own research. Okay, that's 5 points tomorrow on that homework paper. Don't do this on your homework. You put the reference. Proverbs 20:25. That's not one, by the way. I don't know. Proverbs 20:25. That's it. What does the verse say? I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it says you need to write it out so that we can look at it together tomorrow. We'll talk more about that. Does the Bible say anything about this stuff? You're like, wait, these banks weren't even around 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Actually, they were. And people weren't doing it like we do it nowadays exactly, but there still was interest even in King Solomon's day. All right. Yes, sir.
Don't banks also invest in other companies?
Yeah. They do a lot with that money. They can invest in other people or companies or real estate or whatever.
Can we say what other religions say upon interest?
No, you can look. So here, I don't want you to get my opinion on interest or borrowing or anything. I don't want to even hear your opinion on interest and borrowing and debt. I want to know what God says about it. And then we can start thinking about it in a biblical way. That's biblical, by the way. That's what we mean by biblical. So like I have an opinion on interest. It is good. And I have an opinion on interest. It's bad. I don't like it. And some are, I don't care. And others are like, what are you guys even talking about? I get all the variety of opinions. Smart people, not so smart people telling me different things. What does God say himself? So you're going to look that up, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
So anything about debt and loaning and lending?
Anything to do with that money and borrowing or transfer of it, if you can find that out, please bring that verse in.
Would the verse be like, could you use the verse like, this may not be a verse.
Okay. You know how you're going to find out if it's a verse?
You forgive your debtors.
That's a verse, and it's on debt. It's referring more to like those who have offended you. But that's okay. That's actually a lesson in itself. Tempted to give it. Yes. Okay. Listen to me. This is an awesome lesson because it's from Jesus Christ himself. Do you remember Peter goes to Jesus, says, how many times should I forgive my brother? And Peter says 7 times. And what does Jesus say?
1,000.
No, he says not 7 times, but 7 times 70. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Okay, that's 490, by the way, for any of you math people who are like, oh, that's 400. So we're supposed to forgive people, a person, like I'm supposed to forgive Cole 490 times. Like that's the limit. That's not what Jesus is saying. Here's what he says to clarify it. There was a man who owed a ruler a lot of money. In fact, he owed him, if you're doing the conversion, several hundred lifetimes worth of debt. And so the ruler comes to that man and says, it's time to pay your debt. And the man says, I can't pay the debt. Please don't throw my kids and my family into jail. Please, we can't pay it. And he begs for mercy. And that ruler says, you've been cleared of that debt. Awesome, right? That's a great story. That same man who is forgiven goes to one of his servants who owes him, and the conversion is about almost a year's worth of wages. He grabs him by the throat and he says, pay me what you owe me. Then servants of that first ruler come and say, hey, do you hear what he's doing? Your servant that you forgave, he's holding it against another person. And they say, the first ruler says, all right, take him and everything he has, his whole family, go to the prison where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. The end. I'm like, okay, This is Jesus' point here. If you can't forgive your brother who has sinned against you, then neither will your Father in heaven, or neither will God of heaven forgive you of your debts. And here's the whole point. How many times have you been offended by somebody? Like someone's wronged you. They sinned against you guys. There's no doubt. It could have been parents. It could have been siblings. It could have been friends. It could have been a stranger, right? They sinned against you. And guys, that hurts. That feels like a year's worth of wages. Like that's something you don't just brush away and say, no, that's nothing. But how many times have you offended? How many times have you sinned against God? How many times have I sinned? Can I ever repay the debt that I owe to God for my sin? Never. Never, ever, ever. So if I ask God, forgive me of my sins, He forgives me, guys. I mean, this is an exercise in humility. Just today, all the sins I've committed, God forgives if I confess it and say, please forgive me of this sin. Please forgive me my pride, my selfishness, my laziness, my inconsideration of people. And He forgives me just like that. I'll forgive you no matter what. And yet someone offends me and calls me, you're a dumb teacher. They say that to me and they mean it.
People do that.
And then they come to me and say, can you forgive me for doing that? No, I will not forgive you for saying that about me. How can I forgive you? You've called me names. You've said this about me. You've hurt me. And you've done that for a long time. I can't forgive you. So if you can't forgive your neighbor who has wronged you this much, then God will not forgive you of all that you've done toward Him. That's the whole point, guys. If you can't forgive your neighbor who's wronged you, how can God forgive you of all the things you've done toward Him? Do you understand the lesson of that parable? Okay, so do people wrong us? Of course they do. And I've been offended many times. But if I can't forgive them, how do I expect God to forgive me of the... And guys, it's like trillions of dollars worth of debt that I owe Him that I'll never be able to pay Him off. Never, ever. See, that's where I have to realize, yes, people wrong me, but I've wronged God more. If God can forgive me, I can forgive any one of you. None of you have done as much as I've done toward God. And I hope you feel that way too. Yes, ma'am.
So then how are you supposed to forgive people if they keep on hurting you after you forgive them?
So do we ever sin against God over and over and over and over again?
Yeah.
See, you get that? Like I say, God, I'll never say a mean word to somebody. The next day I said a mean word. God, I'll never do it again. I don't want to do it. I do it again. And He keeps forgiving me. Right? That's so like now compared to whoever's wronged you, they keep doing it. Forgive them, forgive them, forgive them. But if they keep doing it, you're just reflecting what God does to you every day. That's awesome. You get to be a son or daughter of God in that way. Yes?
So, which story will you tell us tomorrow, Mr. A?
I don't know. It depends on what verses you guys come up with. So based on what you guys are coming up with, we'll talk about how it relates to interest and debt. Yeah, so I'm excited because it does talk about it. And that's a great one, Stella. You brought it up. Forgiving people of their debts. Yeah, forgive us our debts as we forgive those who, and really it's sin against us. Okay, anyway, let's look at interest. It's the money that is given for borrowing money. So like if the bank borrows my money, they give me something back. If I borrow money, I give them something extra. So that interest is found by a certain little formula called interest equals principal times rate times time. Okay, and I'm going to define these pieces because you're going to need to know what they are. Okay, so principal is not like assistant principal, head principal. That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is original amount. Original amount. So yeah, we talk about amount again and original amount. So like the original amount in this problem is $1,000. The original amount in this problem is $5,000. And it's going to be different in different problems. The rate is talking about the interest rate. Interest rate. So specifically interest rate, not just any rates, interest. So what is the interest rate? And we'll have them for each problem. This is your interest rate. And the time, I mean, can't they be seconds or days, hours, years, months? We're specifically talking about in years. We're talking about in years. But Mr. A, what if they give me in months? You convert it to years. And here's how you convert it. If you borrow that money or if you lend that money for 6 months, how much of a year have you lent it? Half a year. So you can say either half or 0.5. What if you've lent it for 3 months? How much of a year, Aiden? 0.25 or 1/4. What about 9 months of the year? Yes, ma'am? 0.75. Good job. 0.75. So you're going to have to convert those. Those are easy ones. They're not going to make them harder ones.
Should I go get another napkin for my napkin?
Yes. Go.
So for this, is it so how much money total you give back?
It's how much extra money you'll get back or give back. Yes. So we're going to talk about it. And then we'll talk about, well, then how do you figure out the total amount? It's real easy after that. Okay, here's the formula with just letters. Normally how you see it is I equals PRT. I equals PRT. Principal times rate times time. That's what we're dealing with today. All right, look on the top of page 228. And let's talk about Paul taking a college science course over the summer for a certain amount of money. Jimbo. It's at the very top. Read it.
Paul is taking a college science course over the summer. The tuition is $775, which he borrows from the college at a simple interest rate of 3.5%. If Paul pays the money back in 9 months, how much will he owe in all, including interest?
Okay, so they want to know if he borrows a certain amount for 9 months at 3.5%, how much is he going to pay? So here's my formula. I'm going to put in what I know. Let me put the numbers and then I'll get your question. What's the principal? What's the original amount that he borrows? What's the amount that he takes? So I'll put $775. What's the interest rate of that borrowing from the school itself? Yep, Kaden?
3.5%.
3.5%. And then what's the time in years? So he borrows it for 9 months, but you don't put 9 months.
3/4.
3/4. So you could do 3/4 or you could do 0.75, and you have the flexibility to move it. I'm just going to do 0.75.
Would you do 9/12 or does it have to be?
Well, if you do 9/12, you're going to have to reduce it anyway, so you might as well do the reduced form of it. Okay, but you notice I have a fraction and a decimal. I'm like, this is going to be tough. Can I change this to just a decimal percent? 3.5%. 3.5%. So that's the same thing. I didn't change the value of it. I just changed the format. Now, do you just multiply 775 times 3.5% times 0.75? No. What do you do with that percent?
You
Change it to a
decimal.
complete decimal, which means I move the decimal
So left what?
1, 2. So I'm multiplying 775 times 0.035 times 0.75. All right, that's my math problem. If I multiply those three numbers, I will get an interest amount. I will get how much extra he has to pay for borrowing that 775. Ma'am?
Can you say the definition for interest?
I could say, well, I'm going to use the books because they're better. The amount paid for the use of money. The amount paid for the use of money. Which could be positive and negative. Either you borrow money, that's maybe a negative. You have to pay extra. But if you lend money, you get some extra at the end of it. All right. Do you have to multiply in order? Do you have to do 775 times 0.035 times 0.75? You don't have to. You can. I will on this one. But on other problems, I might switch it up because sometimes it's easier to do one way or another. All right, let's see if we get this here. All right. No pressure. Just have a lot of eyes watching what I'm doing. No, well, yes, round it to the nearest cent because we're talking about money. Okay, I got that. We're multiplying those two together. You guys good with that?
Yep.
Okay, then I'm also going to multiply it.
Should
Oh, sorry, don't round it to the very end. So leave that alone and then round it at the very, very end. That's the most accurate answer you can get.
Wait,
I will move in just a moment.
sorry.
No problem. That's 35, 14, 17, 8, 49, 14, 18, 1. Okay, I can still add it, but I'm getting out of the way for some of you. And swivel. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna write out here 5, 7, 13, 14, 13, 10, 20. Okay. Decimal point goes 5 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So my answer is not 20.34375. It's $20.34. That's the extra amount he has to pay. So think of it. He borrows the $775. At the end of 9 months, does he just pay $775 back?
You played.
$775 plus the $20.34. That's how much it costs to borrow that money. Okay, because he's going to pay it all back, but he has to pay extra. How much does he pay back? How much does he pay back? Tyler, this is your question.
795.34.
Do we have to put that?
Yes, you're going to have to put both. This is the interest, and this is the total. Okay? You take the interest and you add it with the principal. So 775 plus 20.34, 795.34. That's how much he's going to pay altogether. So how much does that $775 course cost Paul? $795.34. And you're like, well, who would want to do that? Well, he gets to go into that class without paying the $775, and he has 9 months to pay it back.
And he can work.
He can work in those 9 months and pay it back. And yes, does he pay extra? Yeah, but that's the cost of borrowing money.
His summer's a long time. How did you get that?
And it could be through the actual year, and
When
because
is it this summer?
yeah, so the course, like he could be done with the course and still owe money. Yeah, he doesn't have to pay at the end of the course, thankfully. And some people carry debt years after, which is what happens. Yes, I got Tyler though here with a question.
So, what would happen if he didn't pay it in those 9 months?
So what happens is based on the contract, they can say we're going to charge them a higher interest rate. So now it's going to be not the 3.5, which is really nice. That's a student loan. We're going to jump it up to 20% interest. And then if he still refuses to pay him, we're going to have, this is where they start losing money, but they have to ask somebody to go get the money from him. And if they can't get the cash from him, they'll get it from his possessions. And if they can't get the possessions, they send him to court. And if the court can't get it, they'll declare him bankrupt. And if they declare him bankrupt, you're done. Now, if you're bankrupt, people say, well, just declare bankruptcy. Well, that hurts your credit score, which is a huge part of your financial well.
Wait, how'd you get the second number?
I added 775 with 20.34. Yes, ma'am. You guys should be quiet. Notice this interest rate is 9.5%, so it's a lot bigger than the first one. But can I tell you this right now? I'm going to actually go back because I want you to focus a little bit. The interest rate, 3.5%, that's really nice to borrow at 3.5%. You know what credit card interest rates are? They're like 18.75 to 21 point something percent. So that would be almost, I don't know, 6 times as, no, let's say 5 times as big. So instead of paying the $20, it's like over $100. He's going to have to pay back for borrowing it for the same amount of time. So that's why I want you to look up verses on these ideas of borrowing and lending and creditors, anything that deals with that financial part of our money and how we treat others. It talks about it. I'm going to guess that there's about 50 verses on debt and lending and borrowing. That's my estimate. Maybe like 40 to be more conservative. Yes, sir.
So what do most credit cards max out at?
Oh, I don't know. It just depends on your credit line. Yeah, some, like a young college student might get it at $5,000. That's it. You can't go further than that. And then if you have a big client or a company,
A black card?
yeah, it could be several million. It just depends. Yeah, it depends on your credit worthiness, which is determined by an algorithm in math, which I don't even know because they don't want to share that secret on how do they get your credit score. I don't know. There's some secret formula out there. Camille?
So I don't get why people use banks.
That's a great question. Like, why can't I just keep this money and hold it myself? Because when you put in the bank, every month you're making extra money on it. If you kept it to yourself, nothing. You just keep the $1,000.
Is it extra though?
Extra,
or is
yeah.
it just a less interest?
No, you get no interest at home keeping it in your piggy bank. You make 5% interest, 2% interest, but that's something. And
You don't
can-
have a loan, it's positive.
say that again.
So as long as you don't have a loan, it's positive.
Yeah, usually. Yeah, if you have a savings account, it's usually positive. You're getting money just for letting them have it, letting them sit there, and you don't have to worry about people stealing it. Because even if people say, what if a bank robbery goes on? The bank is required to have extra cash on hand to cover that bank robbery. So that's why they changed that all up after the black market. Okay. Interest equals PRT. What's the principal? 850. What's the rate?
9.5.
Yeah, you could say 9.5.
That's why it's.
That's what the rules are.
I didn't move.
And then, what's the amount of time? 2 years. This sounds more like a very good savings account. Okay, so this is not what they're going to pay. This is not like me borrowing. It's me letting the bank have my money. So this is like a good, really good savings account because you don't usually get this much. Or like an investment with simple interest, which... let me just start this off because I want people to get this. What's 9.5% as a decimal? Just a decimal. 0.095 times 2. 2 years. Okay, this time, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do 850 times 2 first. That's 1,700. And then I'm going to multiply by 0.095. So I'm going to do, because I want to deal with decimals as infrequently as I can, just to make it easier on myself. Ma'am?
So does it really matter though about how you multiply it? Like
No, like,
in order?
yeah, you could do these two first, or these two first, or those two first.
Okay.
But you just want to make it easier on yourself. I would recommend. Yep.
With putting money in a bank,
Yes?
like, for example, if I put $1,000 versus 10,000,
Oh.
I'll make more money off of the 10,000.
Yes.
Since my interest would still be the same, but technically, since I'm putting in more money, the interest is technically going up.
Yes. So like, if you made $10 off this $1,000, you put in $10,000, you make 10 times that. You make $1,000. So like, or what did I say? $10, so $100. Yeah. So you make that much more. Yeah. So the more you put, the more you make.
So instead of putting money in my piggy bank, I can put it in a bank?
Yeah, but it depends on how much. Like if you have a lot in your piggy bank, like over, I don't know, $500, put it in the bank. Or your parents can maybe start up a savings account for you, and you can just add whatever you get, and that just earns interest.
This is so smart. I could do rich. We're just putting it in a bank.
Can you please give me 2 million later, like 2 years?
All right. So my interest is $161.50. That's how much I made after how many years?
Wait.
2 years. Okay.
And then you add.
But that is just the extra money I made. All I had to do was throw in $850, and after 2 years, I made this much extra. So if I said to the bank,
Wait, I'm so.
bank, I'm going to take all my money out of there. Are they going to give me back my $850?
No.
They're gonna give you
Yes.
like.
Yeah, that's my money. And the $161.50, how much am I getting back altogether? That's what I want.
I have
1,011.50
Oh, so you add the principal to the
interest.
extra.
Yes.
Wait, I'm so confused.
And then you just multiply. No, because I did the principal times the rate.
So did I? No, I didn't.
But you have to do .09. Yeah, I did that.
So this is what you should get, 161.5.
You probably got your run numbers wrong.
Yeah, this is going to test our multiplication, so I hope you do well with that. Don't worry, you have 4 problems to test it.
Thank you.
Yes. I can help you out if you want to start out.
I like did not.
Just take one book at a time, that's your own.
At a time.
Why though? That'd be nice.
Well, and that is good, I don't mind that part,
What
but
about
we're not treating these books well, and I don't want you to be responsible for them.
What about
Because if you bring the books and you mess them up, it's your responsibility now, and that shouldn't be.
With like interest, isn't there different interest per each bank?
Yeah, it depends.